16-year-old daughter of Dr. Peters from his first marriage screamed. He took out the side door of Peters and took off to Nashville. And Van Dorn was known for this. Pre-Civil War, second U.S. Cav. He had a mistress with him. He was married, but had a mistress with him. Had 3 illegitimate children in Texas. And I guess he left her. And when the war began, this lady was saying, "You need to stay away from the women. Just stay away from the women while this war is going on." He said, "Well, madam, if I listen to you, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, and I hate all men. The only reason I'm fighting this war for the women." By the way, the artillery we talked about that opened up on Claiborne's was right on this rise, right here, facing that, where there were 16 guns, both sides of the road. I think about 8 of them, more of a psychological effect than a physical effect. But right on this rise here, Wagner's headquarters is where the Ferguson Hall, and that's where Van Dorn got it. And they took him to Columbia. The church wouldn't allow him in a church because of what this did and whatever. They put him in a bank vault, and then they took him down to they buried him in Alabama next to his wife, and his family reinterred him to Port Gibson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where he's buried today. One newspaper said that wine and women brought him to ruin like it does many men. And another Confederate soldier said simply one too many buggy rides. They divorced. There it is, Ferguson Hall. That was Wagner's headquarters, and also where Van Dorn was killed. I don't blame Dr. Peters for shooting him, but shooting him in the back of the head is a little cowardly, I think. But Van Dorn was a great duelist. Nathan Bedford Forrest and Van Dorn almost killed each other. After this stuff in the 63, Thompson Station, first Battle of Franklin, Battle of Brentwood, Forrest getting all the accolades, and Van Dorn asked for a meeting with him and said he's been writing in the newspapers. Forrest stood up, Van Dorn stood up, Forrest started to draw his sword, Van Dorn grabbed his sword, and they're getting ready to get it on. And this staff officer said, "You've showed a great disrespect, General Forrest." And then Forrest said, "Look, there's where Jesse is waving her handkerchief." Forrest said, he said to Van Dorn, he said, "You know, I'm not scared of you, but it'll be a terrible example for the men if you and I fight." And Van Dorn said, "I didn't mean to insult you," and wasn't scared of each other. But next week, Van Dorn was killed in that house. And Medora, Jesse Peters, had a baby on January 24th, 1864. Her name was Medora, and I've already noted she doesn't look like her brothers and sisters. And it's been confirmed, although the Van Dorn family in the 1990s threatened to sue everybody for saying this. The dead have no rights. Any lawyers on this bus? Oh well. But the dead can't sue. The family members can't sue for the dead, and it's true. And Medora was allowed in the house later on, and until he was dying, and she took care of him. And they divorced, Peters, Jesse, and Dr. Peters. Then they remarried. At his funeral in 1889, she was dressed in black, but a black woman overheard Jesse saying, "Well, I never cared much for him, but I guess I owe him this," meaning wearing black. Love's a wonderful thing, and it can be not so wonderful. The 16-year-old that found that, she was immediately sent to a convent in St. Louis. That was from my first marriage. Some people feel this is that in Ireland 40 years ago, a woman became pregnant, they sent her to the convent. And many think that she was pregnated as well. And maybe that's why Peter shot him in the back of the head. And I'm not sure that other, but the other is true. And that's the end of Earl Van Dorn. Earl Van Dorn. He was considered one of the greatest Confederate cavalry commanders up to that time. Holly Springs was a great victory. Mrs. Grant was captured, and then they sent her through the lines. It was not a good day at Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Not a good day at all. His command was coming up to Johnson's at Shiloh, but it was a week after Shiloh had made it up. And Pea Ridge was a debacle. Holly Springs was pretty good. Was a victory. Captured a lot of supplies. And
he wasn't at Brandy Station.
No, that's in the east. That's Stewart. Yes, sir. And
he was not a good infantry.
No, he was not a good. In Corinth, that's what I was grasping for. He commanded the army in Corinth in October the 62. What was that day? 7th, was it, or 4th? And that was a debacle. Yeah. And but Holly Springs, he rectified that some. Then after Stones River, Van Dorn was set up here and brought Jackson's division. Forrest was here as well. Columbia, you have about 15,000 Confederates. Franklin, you have a command, but it was no man's land through here. After Stones River, the Federals, an arc from Lebanon, Murfreesboro, Franklin, Confederates, that arc from Sparta to Eagleville to Lahoma, and then Columbia. And that's the Battle of Thompson Station. We're going to drive through March 5th of 1863. About 649 killed and wounded on both sides, 1,100 Federals captured. And then Battle of Brentwood, March 25th, 63. First Battle of Franklin, April 10th, 1863. A small battle, about 100 killed and wounded, but still, that's a tragedy to me, if one's hurt, personally. And then Van Dorn got it on May 7th of 1863. And Peters was brought to trial. He was not prosecuted or exonerated for violating the sanctity of a man's home, quote unquote. Love is a wonderful thing.
So he's sounding your pilot?
Till it goes south. This is the route, the Columbia Pike, today Highway 31, that the Federals took, moving toward Franklin. And the next morning, after that infamous breakfast at Rippavilla, the orders today was for Stewart's Corps to be up front, Cheatham's follow. General Hood rode up to General Brown. Hood blamed Cheatham, Brown, and Claiborne. Claiborne was told this, I think, by Cheatham. Claiborne was going to demand a court of inquiry after this campaign about it. He was angry, he was upset, he was hurt. Direct orders must always be obeyed. Ringo Gap, he thought he was going to lose his whole division, made Bragg sign it, but he told the staff, I always obey orders. And we know what happened to Ringo Gap. And he wrote up to Brown, John C. Brown, division commander, and to the effect said, if you have your brigade, you attack. If you have a regiment with you, attack. If you have a company with you, attack. Claiborne asked to see Brown on this march up here, and he informed General John C. Brown that he was being blamed for the debacle at Spring Hill. Didn't understand why he didn't go straight into Spring Hill, because he connected with Forrest to attack Luther Rowley's brigade. Brown hoped he was wrong, said no, they're reliable channels. And then an order came up, so we'll talk about it later. They never had a chance to talk about it again. And General Hood in his own book would write about Spring Hill that after a forward movement of 180 miles, I felt my innermost heart I could never eradicate this evil of the Army of Tennessee, only fighting behind breastworks. The best move of my military career, I was thus destined to behold come to naught, quote unquote. We're coming up over this rise into a bowl. It's called Thompson Station. And that was March 5th, 63. John Coburn's command, Federal, from Franklin. Strong reconnaissance with 2,788 infantry, 6 artillery pieces, the 18th Ohio. cavalry under Jordan, about 600, and General Gilbert Smith ordered him out. Here, what shall we do? They came on. The Federals fought very well. Who were they in this battle? The 85th Indiana, 33rd Indiana, 19th Michigan, and 22nd Wisconsin. King's Missouri Battery was here the 5th of March, 63. Morton's Battery is over there. Whitfield's Texas Legion, as well as Armstrong's Brigade here. Forrest was over here to your right, our right. And the Federals attacked with 1,000 men up to the stone wall. The depot retreated. Now the Texans attacked and driven back, and Armstrong's and the Texans attacked. The only time of the war that a woman, civilian, picked up a battle flag off the battlefield, Alice Thompson, who was 17 years old, came out of the basement of that Homestead Manor, that house right there to your left, waved it, ran after him. And General of the 3rd Arkansas, Colonel Earl, his last immortal words was, "Boys, a woman has your flag." And at this point, he had his head knocked off. And but it's a Van Dorn style pattern, if you know what that is. And then Forrest got behind them. The Texans and Armstrong's attacked again. There was a schoolhouse right there. Forrest got behind them. Coburn tried to get out. Both sides fought very well. And at this bald hill over here to your left, as we get on down just a little ways, Forrest got behind them, then hit them on the flanks, and let's see, see that hill to your left, far left? See that little bald hill barely visible right over there? That's where the Federals surrendered. Coburn had a sword that had been in his family for 100 years, the Revolutionary War, nearly, and he gave it to Forrest. Forrest said, "Keep it. Any of the troops fought as well as yours did, you can keep your sword." And I know this tour is not about Thompson Station, but this little drummer boy from the 22nd Wisconsin was 11 years old, had tagged along with them. He busted up his drum, and before they could capture him, and they brought him, because he's a kid, a boy, child, and they brought him up in front of the General Forrest, the 6'2" warrior, bronze, and there's a statue of Roderick right there. I'll tell you Roderick later, the one of 29 horses killed for Forrest. And here's his little banty rooster, 11 years old, defiant, looking up at General Forrest. And General Forrest is smiling at him. And he's defiant, little rooster. He says, "Go on, we don't make war on children, just go on home." Brad put him in jail, but then they let him go home later. I love that story. General Forrest smiling at him, and that boy just... But back to the subject. Everything depicted a route on this march. The Confederates are following. There's broken down wagons. 39 wagons were burned here. And horses and mules' bodies are steaming. If the wagons would break down, the Federals would take their butts and their rifle, hit the poor animals between the eyes and kill them, so they wouldn't be captured. Citizens on the side of the road saying, "Push on, boys, push on." They come at a run, push on. Sam Watkins said everything depicted a route or a route. And they were bound and determined to recover this lost opportunity. Rick, where they come up to this fort, we'll wheel to our right, obviously, unless we want to go into traffic.